Alright, today we make the switch. We're switching over to chapter 6. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that Jesus is switching topics or switching themes or anything like that so much. That just is where the chapter marker was. And if you guys know a little bit about Bible history, you'll know that we didn't have chapter markers when this was originally written. There were no verse numbers. It was written as one letter or one continuous document. It wasn't segregated up. But in this case, they put the chapter marker in a good place because the righteousness and the purity of heart that we've been talking about, now Jesus starts to apply to everyday life. In the first 18 verses of chapter 6, we're going to talk about how this righteousness and purity, how it applies to our worship of God. And then from 19 to 34, we're going to talk about how this righteousness applies to material goods and material things. And then from chapter 7, verses 1 through 20, we'll talk about how this righteousness that Jesus is talking about, this purity of heart, how it applies to people. And today, the first one we're looking at is our giving and our acts of kindness. And you might ask, well, you just subtitled that as an act of worship. That should be an act of worship. Our giving, our acts of kindness, are how we demonstrate, or one of the ways that we demonstrate, not the only way, but a way that we demonstrate our worship of God. You see, worship all the time is not about coming to church on Sunday morning and singing some songs, whether it be hymns or praise music. That's just a small portion of worship. Worship includes our obedience. Worship includes our act of kindness, forgiving other people, and all these other things. Jesus is also going to warn us in this section about hypocrisy. We're going to hear that word at least 3 times in verses 2, 5, and 16. And the word hypocrite or hypocrisy is not used the same way today as what it was then. In the original Greek, the way it would have been translated would be, it would talk about an actor or an actress who wears a mask to cover up who they are. And in the context that Jesus is using this, he's talking about how the Pharisees, the scribes, the Essenes, the religious leaders of that day would be actors. They would be doing everything they could do to draw attention to themselves. It was kind of like a thing, you all need to sacrificially give. You guys need to give from the heart and you need to sacrifice. Notice how I phrase that. Y'all need to. Y'all need to. Me, since I'm the pastor, or in this case would have been priest, I don't need to. Because my service is enough. And that is exactly what they're talking about and what Jesus is talking about. A lot of times the word hypocrite will get used for a Christian who sins, or a Christian who makes a mistake, or a Christian who didn't live up to the standards, ethical or moral. It's not necessarily the case, because if that was the case, we would all be hypocrites all the time, every day. But what Jesus is talking about are those who deliberately use religion and the practice of their religion to cover up their sin. In this case, as we read through the passage, you will see that the sin is clearly narcissism. It's clearly all about me. The righteousness of the Pharisees was insecure and insincere and dishonest. I mean, when we get towards the along in this, you guys will remember that, the parable Jesus tells about 2 men went up to pray, and the Pharisee flat out said, "Thank you that I'm not like these people over here, but I'm not like this man. I do this, I do this, I do this, I do this, and I do that. Thankful, but I'm not like y'all." I mean, that is some serious narcissism there. And the way they practiced their worship when it came to acts of kindness, and when it came to their giving, they did it for one reason. And that was for the applause of men. To hear, "Well done, you're such a good priest. Look at that priest over there, or that pastor. Look at all he's doing and giving. Boy, ain't he something. And Jesus is clearly going to warn that attaboy or attagirl, that's all you get. The praise that you receive from mankind is the praise you get. No more, no less. There is no reward from God. As we read this, listen carefully. Be very careful not to do your good deeds publicly to be seen by men. Otherwise you will have no reward prepared for you and awaiting you from your Father who is in heaven. That is some straight to the point preaching right there. So whenever you give to the poor and do your acts of kindness, do not blow the trumpet before you to advertise, as the hypocrites do, which is an actor playing a role. And they do it in the synagogues and in the streets so that they may be honored and recognized and praised by men. I assure you and most solemnly say to you that they have already received their reward in full. But when you give to the poor and do your acts of kindness, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Give in complete secrecy, so that your charitable acts will be done in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. Giving alms to the poor, praying, and fasting are important disciplines in the Christian life. And it was an important discipline to the Pharisees as well. And Jesus does not condemn those acts. That is not what he's doing here. But he does caution us that we are not doing them for the wrong reasons. That we're not doing them to seek attention. See, the Pharisees would use their almsgiving and their acts of kindness to gain favor from God and to get attention from men, which both are wrong motives. And no amount of giving can earn or purchase salvation, and there certainly is no extra credit with God. Well, I put an extra 20 in the offering plate today, so I got extra credit with God. I got 2 extra bonus points. There is nothing like that with God. To be honest with you, if that's why you gave to the poor or done an act of kindness or any sort of charitable deed, if you've done it for that reason, the only reward you have is the reward that you make up in your own head. I just did it because I want that extra credit. That's all you get. And when Jesus is talking about sounding the trumpet, I want to make sure you kind of get this part. There could be 2 ways that he's talking about this, and he does talk about this in 2 different ways. First, their offering boxes at the temple were boxes. And they had like a funnel-shaped thing on top of them. Like a funnel. And he talks about this when he talks about the widow giving the 2 copper coins. What these guys would do is they would go by and they would throw their coins, so they didn't have folding money like we have, they had coins, and instead of just putting it in there, they would throw it in there. And if you've ever thrown a handful of change into something metal, you know what happens. It makes noise. And these guys would throw it in there to make noise. To make sure Dave heard over there how much I gave today, because I made a big show of it. And you're counting it? Okay, yeah. Just to make sure that everybody got it. And the second way he used it is like how he used it in this passage. These guys would actually go out into the marketplace. So in our day and age, this would be they go to Walmart or Kroger or Meijer or wherever it is that people gather to shop. And they would actually have a town crier. You guys know what a town crier is, right? The guys that blow the trumpet. Hear ye, hear ye. Pharisee blah, blah, blah is on his way to give alms to the poor. He's here to give you poor folks what you deserve, his acts of kindness. And of course the poor people would come and they would get their, whatever it is. And the blind and the beggars and, all the other disenfranchised people would come. But it wasn't about the giving. It was about making sure that Pharisee, whosoever, got the attention, because he wanted everybody to see how great he was. So in either one of these cases, this is what Jesus is talking about. They are making a spectacle of their charitable deeds. They're making a spectacle of their giving for attention. Today we might call that your 15 minutes of fame. How many times have you guys ever seen on the news that some famous person goes somewhere and they drag a news crew with them to go we're building this hospital in this poor place in Africa or one of the islands or South America or whatever. And we're here, boy, we're working and we're doing all this. Look at us at what we're doing. I mean, you guys have all seen that sort of craziness on the news. Even more locally, how many buildings are named for a person? I'm going to give so much to the church that they're going to name a pew after me. I mean, that happens. It really does. And this is what Jesus is talking about here. It's narcissism in a nutshell. It's living for the praise of man. And as we call it today, the 15 minutes of fame, exactly what it is. It's 15 minutes of fame. That praise, that glory that you get from that doesn't last. However, you do it, your acts of kindness and your righteousness and your giving, if you do those things from your heart, not out of obedience, not out of compulsion, not out of narcissism, that's where you get the glory and praise from God. And that endures forever. That doesn't just disappear. And it's easy for the subtleness of our sinful nature to get in and defile something good like this, because an act of kindness, giving to the poor, doing righteous deeds, those are great things and they're beneficial. But because of our sin nature, and that selfishness and that self-centeredness we all have in us, it can cause us to do this good thing with the wrong motive and for the wrong reason, and it'll result in just that 15 minutes of fame, instead of resulting in God being glorified and us growing in that grace and knowledge. I guess I've never understood how people can say they're doing something for God. I do this for the Lord. But I want to make sure you know that my name is. I mean, yeah, there are some ministries that do come with a bit of fame. But is that really what it's about? Maybe for some it is. But like I said, it's just one that has always puzzled me. How many times people will do exactly like what we see on the screen here. And I hope you guys can see that well. Do you see if that guy's giving money to that poor family? Do you see what he's got going on there? He's got a selfie stick. And he's taking a picture of himself doing it. And how many of us have seen pictures like that on social media? Now, I know, except for you that live in the Stone Age back there, Andy. But if you're on social media, you'll see that sort of stuff. Look at the kindness. Look at what I did. And every like they get is one less like you get from God. Now, does this mean that everything that we do has to be done in secret, and if somebody ever finds out about it, we've lost all reward? No. You recall from Acts, in particular Acts 4, Barnabas sold a big chunk of land and gave the money to the apostles to help the early church. And during this time, in Acts 1, 2, 3, and 4, even in 5, the offerings were brought directly to the apostles. The apostles knew who the money came from, who the food came from. They knew that. But it wasn't about Barnabas' motivation. Ananias and Sapphira, however, chapter 5, what they do was about gaining fame. They sold a piece of land too, just like Barnabas did, but they held back some of the money. And then they went to the apostles bragging about how awesome of a gift they just gave. They were lying to God and lying to the apostles. And that didn't work out. If you know that story, you know it did not work out well for them at all. They didn't even make it out of the tent. Well, they made it out of the tent, but it was 6 strong men that took them out of the tent. People are going to notice when we give. But what matters is, am I making sure they notice? Am I making sure that I manipulate the situation to get the attention? And do I really want to hear well done from y'all? Or do I want to hear well done from God? Now, I may not hear it right away. And a lot of times people will say, well, I want to hear both. Yes, there is a common courtesy involved with the thank you. But that's all the more it needs to be. We get upset that there's not more of it on the board, and we don't understand Malachi really well and what God talks about robbing. And even though this is an internal act, an external act, that it's something that you physically do on the outside, it has great internal implications. If we do want to hear well done from mankind, if we do want to hear that praise, and that lets us know that there's some work God needs to do on us on the inside. That there's some internal implications. That there's a heart situation there that God needs to work on. We would all do well to take John the Baptist's approach. When Jesus' ministry started outgrowing his, and his disciples went to him and said, hey John, Jesus is doing a way better job. There are more and more people going there than here. What did he say? He said, he must increase and I must decrease. And that's the attitude we need to take. It isn't about what I do. It's about what can God do in me and through me. And that's where we need to get in our walk with the Lord. In me and through me. Not because of me, and maybe sometimes in spite of me. But all we are the conduit to which God's blessings flow. Let's pray. Lord, I pray that you would use us to be your conduits, to be your hands and feet. And it's easy, Lord, for us to want to take the glory and lay claim to it, that somehow we did something special. Lord, the bottom line of it is we can't outgive you, and we can't show more kindness than you do. And it all comes from you. So I pray, Lord, that we would learn that we would humbly accept our position in this, and let your blessings flow through us. Understanding that it doesn't matter what we give, that you can always replace and do more. So Lord, help us all to get past this. In Jesus' name, amen. If you all would stand.